When we think about the law, we usually picture these huge, dusty books just filled with ironclad rules. But what if I told you that the law isn't nearly so black and white, that understanding it is actually less about what's written down and more about interpretation? Let's dive into how this hidden layer of meaning really shapes everything. Okay, to really get what I'm talking about, let's start with a super simple scenario. You're moving into a new apartment and the lease is crystal clear. No pets, period. But what about your goldfish? Does he count? It seems like such a simple question, right? But the answer, or lack of one, kind of reveals a fundamental crack in the entire foundation of law. So your landlord, who's probably thinking about potential water damage or having to clean up later, sees any animal as a pet. Makes sense. But the owner of the pet store, they might see it completely differently. It's not a dog, it's not a cat, it doesn't make any noise. And look, they both have a valid point, right? The same exact word, pet, can have two totally different meanings. It all depends on who you ask. And this exact problem is right at the heart of our entire legal system. So yeah, that whole argument over a goldfish, it actually gets us right to our first big idea, the problem with words. I mean, words are supposed to be the building blocks of our laws, right? But as we just saw, they can be super slippery. And this isn't just some fun thought experiment. It's a massive challenge that judges and lawyers deal with every single day. It's literally their job to figure out the true meaning behind words that might have been written down decades or even centuries ago. All right, so how do we start to solve this mystery of meaning? Well, we've got to look at the main piece of evidence, the written law itself. And in the legal world, there's a specific name for that. Right. So a statute is basically the official rule book. It's the law that's been formally written down and passed by a government body, like Congress or Parliament. In theory, it's supposed to be the final word on what we can and can't do. But, and you can probably see where this is going, this brings us right back to our big problem. We have this official rule book, the statute, but the words inside it can be fuzzy. So how on earth does a judge figure out what the lawmakers actually meant when they wrote it? And this is where the real art of being a judge comes in. See, they don't just guess. They have this special set of tools to figure it all out. Think of it like a legal detective's toolkit for deciphering the law. Yeah, a judge can't just wake up one morning and go with a gut feeling. Nope. They have to follow these established principles. It really is like that detective's toolkit. Each tool is designed for a specific purpose, helping them uncover the meaning that's hidden in the text. So let's open up this kit, shall we? Let's look at the top 3 tools they use. First up, you've got the literal rule. This one is exactly what it sounds like. You take the words on the page and you give them their most plain, ordinary dictionary meaning. That's it. No reading between the lines. The law is the law, even if the result seems weird or even a little bit unfair. Okay, but what happens when following the words literally leads to a totally absurd result? Well, that's where the golden rule comes in. You can think of this one as the common sense check. It lets a judge step back and say, whoa, hold on. This can't possibly be what the lawmakers intended. It gives them permission to tweak the meaning just enough to avoid a ridiculous outcome. And last but not least, we've got the mischief rule. This one is pure detective work. Instead of just staring at the words on the page, a judge using this rule asks one crucial question. What problem, or in old-timey legal speak, what mischief was this law trying to solve in the first place? It's all about finding the original purpose behind the law. All right, I know what you're thinking. These rules sound a little academic, right? A bit abstract. So let's put them to the test with a real case that had very, very real consequences. So let's jump in our time machine and head back to 1960s England for a case called Smith versus Hughes. The situation was this. A woman was trying to attract customers from her apartment balcony, which happened to overlook a public street, and she got charged under a new law. And here's the million-dollar question for the court. The law, called the Street Offenses Act, made it a crime for someone to solicit in a street. So the entire case came down to this. Is a private balcony considered to be in a street? And how you answer that? Well, it depends entirely on which tool from that toolkit you decide to use. And this is the mind-blowing part. Depending on which tool the judge picked, you get 2 totally different verdicts. If the judge had used the literal rule, she'd be not guilty. Simple. Why? Because a balcony is a balcony and a street is a street. The words are the words. But the judge didn't use that rule. Instead, he reached for the mischief rule. He asked, what was the mischief this law was trying to stop? And the answer was pretty clear. The law was designed so people could use the streets without being harassed. And since what she was doing from the balcony was causing that exact problem, he found her guilty. The choice of interpretive rule changed everything.
Okay, so that's a cool old story, but so what? Why does any of this matter to you and me today?
It matters because this whole process of interpretation is basically the hidden engine that makes our legal system run. It's what allows old laws to be applied fairly to totally new situations. It's what stops those absurd outcomes from happening, and it's what lets the law adapt and evolve as our society changes, so we don't have to rewrite everything constantly. It's all about finding the true purpose behind the words. And that's really the big takeaway here. Interpretation is what transforms the law from some dusty old rulebook into a living, breathing thing that can actually respond to modern life. It's what keeps our laws relevant and, hopefully, just. Which, of course, leaves us with one last big, tricky question. If a judge's choice of how to interpret the words can literally decide if someone is guilty or innocent, are they just applying the law as it was written? Or are they, in a very real sense, making the law right there from the bench? Something to think about